It's not reliable. But we replace blind faith now with believing in scientists. A lot of people do. My stepmother, she's a good example. She reads something is true and she believes it. But of course that's not true for everyone, but for many, many people.
I think also it's not only, I think it can even to be intellectually acquired. It is so common thing to think that there is no future life, for example. The people even doesn't hesitate to see whether there is or not.
Pardon?
The scientists don't believe in past and future lives, right?
Some do. Chinese do.
Most of them don't.
I don't know whether that's most of them.
Yeah, you think most of them believe in past and future lives?
There's been some research about China, and there's been a research in general. Are there more people believing in past and future lives, or more not? Well, because most people in India do, and most people in China, because of now there are 4 million Buddhists now in China, right? So in terms of numbers, there are a lot. There are 4 million Buddhists in China, and I don't know how many millions and millions of Hindus who, as part of their philosophy, believe in past and future lives.
It's intellectually acquired, so that's why in the West, most of the people don't believe in past and future life, because scientists say there is none. Because that's why you put my case, because in India...
Not just because scientists are nuns, we naturally feel there is no past and future lives. We naturally feel, I think we're born with the sense of...
So why do Indians and Chinese do think there is...
Because it's intellectually acquired, because of their religion.
That's what I heard.
Yeah, but what's the problem with that?
No, it's no problem. Just that I say that in the West, it's intellectually acquired. There's no past and future lives. People don't hesitate about that. They don't even ask questions about it.
Okay, anyway, I don't think we are not disagreeing here. I'm saying there's an innate sense that before we died there was nothing, and when we die there's nothing. We have that innate sense because we don't remember what's before, and we can't come back to tell anyone what it was like. We come back without our memory. So therefore we innately feel there is no past and future lives. Intellectually, that is added by the scientific view of brain over mind. That supports that innate view. In other cultures, there is the intellectually acquired view of there is past and future lives.
So we agree.
Yes. So I don't think there's a point. What I'm trying to say here, the whole point I'm making here, people struggle with certain ideas in Buddhism, and I think they only struggle with those ideas because they're misunderstood. First of all, faith. You don't have to believe anything. That was the whole point. Like I said, faith should be based on reasoning, plus it should be temporary until you come to an understanding yourself. That is the only way. And to also not underestimate, also to understand that a lot of the things we think we know, we don't know. We just believe them to be true. Most of our life is based on what other people tell us. I mean, even if you think of what your teachers tell us, many of the teachers provide us with the information, and we believe that to be true. Which is why we're very readily, one day coffee is good for us, and the next day they'll tell us it's not good for us, right? Whoever is right, and it's probably more complicated depending on the person, the amount, etc. But I'm just saying, there's very little we really know. There's very little we really know. And in terms of consciousness, whether there's consciousness or not, from a Buddhist point of view, there is brain and consciousness. From a scientific point of view, nowadays, brain and consciousness. But where's the difference? In science, the idea is, and I don't know, I could be wrong here, but my understanding, my limited understanding from talking to people who come to Dharamsala, like neuroscientists, and they're only very few, there's not like the general, but it's always, the consensus is always brain over mind. As in like the brain creates the mind. The brain creates everything. From a Buddhist point of view, it's the other way around. The mind is responsible for what the brain looks like.
But that implies impermanence. Because if consciousness creates...
Everything is impermanent. Everything is impermanent.
It's impermanent.
Yes. I don't know why you think...
Won't say that. They say that when the brain dies, the mind will die. If it's brain over mind.
No. Impermanent is misunderstood. You don't...
It's not eternal.
That's not eternal. That's different. You see, from a Buddhist point of view, we would say this table is impermanent, but not eternal. Right? It goes out of existence at some point. So there's a misperception in terms of, oh, okay, impermanent and permanent. It's very natural, and usually when I have the chance to write like a handout, I always put it in there. When we say impermanent, we don't mean that it's always there. Whatever is impermanent doesn't have to always be there. Whatever is permanent doesn't have to always be there. Whatever is impermanent has to change moment by moment. That's it. So, to give you an example, this table is impermanent, it changes moment by moment, but it's not always there. It goes out of existence. Okay? My mind will always be there, from a Buddhist point of view. It's changing moment by moment, and it will always be there. So scientists, I think they would say the mind is impermanent, because it changes moment by moment, but it goes out of existence. So there's a difference. Yeah. Yes.
My question is regarding the tenets.
The tenet systems.
Yeah, the Buddhist tenets. As we go higher to higher tenets, they usually say that of the lower tenets, their view is not subtle enough, and therefore they cannot explain, for example, cause and effect.
We talk about this more tomorrow in terms of, but let me hear your question first.
My question, usually it is presented in the form that the way, for example, the Sutra school present cause and effect and the true truth, they cannot abide together. There's contradiction there from the point of view of the Prasangika, and Prasangika present the contradiction. My question is not from the point of view of ultimate truth, but from the point of view of the three ways of interdependence or the interorigination. If one only holds for the first one, so the first one, that things depends on cause and conditions, but does not accept that things has to depend subjectively. Does not merely label. That means when I go out, everything is, I mean, the flower, for example, depends on causes and conditions, I accept, but not depends on mine. Can the Prasangika say, well, if you don't accept it depends subjectively, there is a fault of saying...
Yes, absolutely. So what Shaha is saying, he's asking with regard to dependent arising. Okay? Dependence in particular on causes and conditions. Does only the Prasangika fully understand dependence on causes and conditions? And the answer would be yes. It's incomplete. It's incomplete.
Okay, say that again?
With regard to dependence on causes and conditions, is it only the Prasangika view who fully understands this? And in answer to this, it's yes. I mean, you may think, for instance, very classic example, a Christian. Would a Christian fully understand dependence on causes and conditions? Like a seed arises from a sprout. No, the other way around. A sprout arises from a seed. Fire gives rise to smoke.
What you sow is what you reap.
What you saw is what you reap. So do Christians fully understand the concept of causes and conditions? No, they don't. Because of the idea of God creating certain experiences. Maybe not all, but a lot of experiences. That is not a cause of our problem. If it's another person giving us happiness, from a Buddhist point of view, that's not possible. So that's one example. They're not consistent. Yes, they believe in cause and effect on one hand, but then they believe God could create a good harvest. So it's not the seed. The seed is important, yes, the warmth is important, the water is important. If all the conditions are there, you don't need God to get a good harvest. And if the conditions are missing, God gives you a good harvest, even though the seeds were crappy and the soil didn't have enough minerals. What kind of cause and effect is that? Do you get what I'm saying? It's very inconsequent. Pardon? Yeah, but how could God cause a good harvest without having all the causes and conditions there? Like, does God always cause a good harvest, or only sometimes? If God only causes it, God always, we don't need to plant. We just pray to God. Why do we need to plant anything if God always causes it? No. And if God sometimes causes it, well then, we could always make sure all the causes and conditions come together. We don't have to rely on God, because if all the causes and conditions are there, we don't need God. You see, this is just the logic from a Buddhist point of view. I don't say don't believe in God. I'm just saying, from a Buddhist point of view, there's a part missing there. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. So no discussion with Judaism or Christianity. I chose a Christian, so. All right?
I was speaking about the sutra school.
I know you did. I know you did talk about the sutra school. So, then you can talk about the Vaibhashika and the Satantrika. What do they say? Not a creator God. No, they don't talk about that. But they talk about an inherent I. An inherent I and an inherent consciousness, well, which creates effects. How could an inherent consciousness, which exists independently, be dependent on something? Right? How could it be something that is inherent, means independent? It doesn't depend on anything. It's inherent in the person to be a person. It's inherent in the table to be a table. Why would you need causes and conditions that give rise to a table? If it's inherent in the table. Right? Simple as that.
But I will even put it in this way. So what we, they say, okay, so I accept it's the
God,
cause
you
and
guys are
effect.
really tough.
The cause and effect, for example, very specifically, the seed and the sprout are not inherently existent,
No.
but there being a cause and effect does not depend on the mind labeling them.
But they don't say that but they don't. They do. If the Satantrika hypothetically were to believe that causes and conditions didn't exist inherently, they don't believe that. They think all the way up to the Svatantrika, except for the Prasangika, everyone says causes and conditions exist inherently, right? So, but if you were to leave aside labeling and if you were to believe everything else.
Yeah, even if it is a prasangika, I say, okay, it is a prasangika, I accept that cause and effect must exist, not inherently.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't accept that it can, for cause and effect to to function, a mind needs to label it. It can function without a mind. It is not subjectively existent.
But if it's not, how can it exist non-inherently and not be dependent on labeling? That's contradictory.
Because it depends on its causes.
Yeah, but dependent on its causes, what makes it a table unless we call it that? The causes didn't say, table, table. I mean, the thing is, like, from a Buddhist point of view, lack of inherent existence can only be really explained in dependence on labeling. You don't really, dependence on causes and conditions doesn't explain lack of inherent existence fully. Dependence on parts, it doesn't either. What explains it fully is labeling. So if it's not just labeled, then it's like, you call it that, you don't call it that, it is that thing in and of itself.
It's not the functioning.
Pardon?
It's not the functioning of the thing that is part of this.
It's not the function. Oh, of the object?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Of course, you're right. It's the function, it's the basis of imputation. That is also needed. Like we mentioned during the lesson today, I said, when we label something, it depends on the basis of imputation, on the basis of labeling, and on the labeling consciousness. Depends on both, right? So when we say the basis of imputation, that also means not just the parts, but also the function that those parts perform.
But you
The
can
parts assembled in a certain way, and therefore now able to perform a certain function.
And also the causes and conditions.
but the function can be changed, and then the labeling will be changed as well for the same
That's
object.
different. That's okay. Okay, when the function changes, it means the
Yeah.
parts change. When the parts change, the function
No.
changes. And when the function changes, it's no longer called a table. It's called firewood, for instance. If that's the case, right? Like now it performs the function of holding things.
Right.
But like, let's say you disassemble it and you use it differently, it performs a different function.
Even without this assembly, I can use it. I can take this table, I can hang it on the wall, and use it as a hanger or a shelf, and call it a shelf.
Okay, you can call it a chair, and you can say it's a table and a chair at the same time. I mean, that's taking it to a different degree. But like the function, it still performs the same function, whether you use it in that way or not. Even if you hang it at the wall, it's still a table because it still performs the function of calling, of just because you see, there's a difference between it performs the function or I don't use it in that way. It performs the function of a table. Okay? But it also performs the function of a chair. So I can say it's a chair and it's a table, both.
And it, okay.
Something that is long in relation to one thing. In relation to how it functions, I can call it a table. In relation to how it functions, I can call it a chair. In relation to a matchstick, this is long. In relation to a broom, it's short. Am I making sense? It's always in relation to something else. Here in this case, longer shape, shorter shape. Or in relation to this function, that I call it this, that, and the other. Right? The function or the parts assembled in a certain way. And so I can use it differently, but that's not that it's not a chair. It's still a table. The function is still there. It still performs the function. I just don't use it that way. Right?
No, what I'm saying that...
I know what you're saying.
It's also the function depends on the perceiver. I can...
The function depends on the perceiver, but just because you don't perceive it as a table, it doesn't mean it's not a table.
Right. But but also because you perceive it as a table, doesn't necessarily make it a table.
That is true. That is also true, but I didn't say because you perceive it. You said if you put it on the wall, it no longer performs the function of a table. That I disagree with.
No, I didn't say that.
You said even if the function doesn't change, the object can change. You said, for instance, a table you can use it as a shelf. Now it's a shelf. I said no, it's still a table that you use as a shelf. Okay. All right.
I disagree.
Okay, good. Very good. No, I'm sorry. I'm so trained in this kind of debate back and forth. So
No, but
right, but it's very good. You disagree?
Yeah,
Perfect.
It would be interesting to,
Yes.
to do that.
If we had more time, but
Yeah.
Tomer is suggesting that we actually give
Yeah,
it a
we
rest
finish, yeah.
because it's great. We can go on all night, but
No.
I don't think we can go on tomorrow. Then can you keep it on
Let's dedicate.
till tomorrow?
It's actually a personal question. Maybe.
Then we can come up tomorrow, personally, you and
And
I.
not like a personal, like if we find. You can choose whether now is the time.
Okay, not now.
Okay.
No, no.
All right. So you sit with it tonight, and then tomorrow, if you still have the same question, please come up. And if I feel like everyone else, well, you can also ask it in class. We'll make more time. Okay? Just I'm stretching it too far in terms of myself, but of course in terms of you. You guys are amazing. So let's do the dedications. We'll dedicate. If you have that much energy left, we'll dedicate the marriage. Page 19, yes.
בזכות חסד זה, להוסיף במעט מצב התמודדה ולהוביל למצב זה את כל הנוגדים. תודעת ההערה האלוהית לקראת הערך שטרם נודעת וזו שנודעה לא תתכוון ותשגה בלבד. בארץ זו מוקפת רכסי הרים ושלגים, כמו רווחה והעושר שלא יוצא מן הכלל, אבל תשמע רב העוצמה תן ידיעה צור ותוותר על קץ החיים.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you very much for